The Lobotomized Owls selector, short for the owl selector, is a CSS concept created by Heydon Pickering. Although it is not an official CSS selector, it is a quite useful concept to know, so it is included in this course. So let's see the definition first. The owl selector, invented by Heydon Pickering, is a CSS concept which targets every element that immediately follows another element within a defined scope. The first element in the scope is excluded from the selection as there is no preceding element to match it with. So, this is often referred to as the owl selector. Is it because it looks like an owl? I think it's a pretty cute name. Alright, so the definition sounds a bit complex, so let's take a look at an example to better understand how the owl selector works. Let's look at the following HTML structure. So we have 4 elements, A, B, C, and D. If we want to select element B, C, and D, but excluding A, which is the first element of the sibling group, we can use the owl selector. Before we dive into how owl selector works, let's review what we learned about the adjacent sibling combinator since the owl selector utilizes it. Using the adjacent sibling combinator, we can select the B element because it is right next to the A element from the adjacent sibling combinator here. Now let's see how the owl selector operates. So we have 4 elements for the owl selector to consider, and since the owl selector uses universal selectors, it will select all possible elements. So let's start with the first element, which is the A element. The first universal selector will point to the A element. So it is not selecting the A, but it's just pointing to the A element. Then we apply the adjacent sibling combinator to the second universal selector, which selects the B element. So this is the element we are targeting. As we mentioned before, universal selectors selects all elements. So we will move on to the second element, which is the B element. Again, the first universal selector will point to the B element. Then we will use the adjacent sibling combinator with the second universal selector to select the next element, which is the C element. And we will continue with the same approach and select D element next. So finally, the owl selector will select the B, C, and D elements, excluding A from this HTML. Cool. Now let's review it. So the owl selector makes use of the universal selectors and adjacent sibling combinator. For the first step with the owl selector, it will select the B element. And the second step will select the C element. And then the last step will select the D element. The owl selector is useful when we need to select all elements except for the first element in the same scope. We will take a look at more practical examples in the coding practice session. While the owl selector is useful, there is a new CSS property called margin trim that performs a similar function. The margin trim is still an experimental technology, and at the time of recording this video, it's only available in Safari. So we will keep you updated when the margin trim is available in all modern browsers. With the margin trim property, a container can actually trim the margins of its children where they meet the container's edges. We will take a look at the example with the margin trim in the coding practice session as well. Alright, now it's time for some hands-on practice.